Air Jordan, Magic Man, Larry Legend, the Diesel. My dad used to tell me stories about the old days when big men dominated, but that all changed when Magic came into the picture. The Diesel was the only one able to change the tide back to the way it was, and when the world needed him most, he was too old already. People believe that the era of big men is over, but I believe that somehow they never truly left. Before diving into the 7 feet part of the pool, I think it's important for us to define a few things. First, when people say big men, they're most likely referring to the center position, which over time has been associated with any player that is 7 feet tall, even though players in all different sizes have played it. When former players talk about the big men, I believe that they're often talking about play style, looking for players to dominate the paint, developing post-up moves, and being a focal point of an offense.
If you don't let us post up and get the other team in foul trouble or draw the double, you just don't know how to coach.
When I say big men, I open up that category to other players. Like in my previous video, Kobe had to go through Kevin Garnett twice. LeBron lost to Tim Duncan twice. Dirk. And even Kevin Durant. I believe that rather than big men disappearing, they've been mutating. Wait, that just doesn't sound right. Let's try morph, transform, modify, evolve. I think that the NBA has been trying to sweep the center position and the idea of the big men under the rug for over 40 years now. Why, you ask? Because they've been way too dominant. When I opened the big man category to players like Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, Dirk Nowitzki, Kevin Durant, and Giannis Antetokounmpo, they're the MVPs for 34 of the 76 championships. That's an impressive 44.7% of all the MVP awards. Guards have won 21 out of 76, and to be even more specific, point guards have only won 9 out of 76, which is only 11.8% of the MVP awards. What I think happened is that from 1947 to 1979, big men were extremely dominant, winning games, MVP awards, and more importantly, championships. But none of that equaled popularity, TV ratings, and ultimately, dollar signs. So let's start at the beginning of the end for the big men. And that puts us in 1979. The world was very different then. No social media, no internet, and oh yeah, the widespread use of cocaine in the NBA through the 70s. The league was struggling at that time. There were plenty of fights, dwindling viewership, and an average salary of $180,000. This was a very different NBA from the league that we know and love. But that was the NBA that Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were drafted into. Not only would these two players go on to dominate the NBA and become legends, but they were the first two of the incredible 4 players that would enter the NBA in the 80s and change the sport for good. Magic and Larry would go on to split the regular season MVP award from the 83-84 season through the 89-90 season, except for 1 year, where Michael Jordan received his first MVP award in 1988. The only big man to win an MVP award in the 80s was Moses Malone, which he won twice. The big man was suddenly pushed to the background, with guards and their flashy play taking center stage. What happened as a result of this? Commercials, commercials, commercials. The NBA took the rivalry between Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell in the 60s and rebooted it with Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. They made commercials around their rivalry with famous ads from McDonald's and Converse, which further grew the sport. As the NBA entered the 90s, salaries were up to nearly $900,000, and upcoming players have had a decade to watch, study, and try to be Magic Johnson.
Pretty pass from Chris Webber.
Magic is still considered the best point guard ever, and his style of play is far different from the point guards we see today. The reason for that is actually simple. None of these guys are 6'9". I believe that Magic was the first step of evolution for basketball players, not even for point guards.
In my opinion, the evolution started in my generation with guys like Magic and Chuck. Now I'll explain. You saw Magic being 6'9" and he could dribble. Remember the stereotypes of basketball, big fellas on that end, little fellas on this end. When Magic started dribbling, we was like, no, big fellas on this end too. Whether it was Steve Smith, whether it was other guys. When Barkley took it behind his back, went down, dunked two hands, it was like, okay, big fellas can now lead the break. So now in practice, we're doing things just as simple as just take the middle lane. You know, big fellas never get to take the middle lane. So in high school, I see these guys do it. I'm not thinking about Dirk or anybody else. We're older than them. We're thinking, no, this is part of the league now.
Chris Webber, who was drafted in 1993, had his mind blown as a teenager, seeing a 6'9" player doing things that since the 50s was not allowed for big men to do. And Webber was a great example of a big man who was highly skilled and exhibited guard skills his entire career. In just one decade, the NBA shed the cocaine stigma, raised the average annual salary, and already began showing signs of an evolving big man. While the 90s was filled with dominant traditional centers, the 90s also brought big men that were highly skilled, with players like Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, Rasheed Wallace, and of course, Dirk Nowitzki. Despite the new talent with new skill sets that entered the league, there was one traditional big man that sped up the evolution even more. The Diesel was drafted in 1992, and to be frank, he fucked it up for all the centers to come after him. The 7'2" behemoth is easily the most dominant force we've ever seen in the NBA, and that changed the league entirely. Shaq, who's listed at 325 online, admits that en route to his third championship, he got all the way up to 395 pounds, which is scary to think because he was so quick still, and it's no surprise to me that he literally struck fear into opponents. Even Shaq says that he believes his dominance and physicality caused players to drift further and further away from the basket.
The more physical I became, I just seen all the other centers do this. They just slowly keep doing that, keep doing that.
And I think seeing a player like Shaq made it easier for players who were 7 foot tall and skinnier to slide down to the power forward position like Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, and Dirk Nowitzki. In the 70s and 80s, those guys would have probably been forced to play the center position, but in the 90s, they were able to start carving out a new look power forward position, a position that would be occupied by elite players through the 2000s. The next part of the story puts us in 2001. The NBA was blessed with Kwame Brown, a 6'11" center with athleticism and mobility, but he was never able to scratch the surface of his potential. As the laughingstock of the league, the same thing happened to the position. As power forwards were becoming more prominent, the center was drifting further and further from the spotlight. The center position became all brawn, the new enforcers of teams, which in the 90s was typically the power forward. Steve Nash was the first point guard since Magic Johnson in 1990 to win an MVP award. 15 years it took for a point guard to hoist the award again, in an NBA that had players like Shaq, Kobe, Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, and the list goes on. I believe that Shaq and maybe other players who felt slighted by not receiving the award were frustrated not with Nash, but with the league. Seeing how teams are constructed and how they play in years after Nash winning, it's pretty clear to me that the NBA loved that playstyle. The Phoenix Suns' run and gun offense put an emphasis on three-point shooting and fast break baskets, which is exactly what we see in the NBA today. The Phoenix Suns were early to small ball, maybe even the start of it, as they slid Amari Stoudemire to the center spot and Sean Marion to the power forward position, surrounding them with shooters in a spread-style offense, making them very difficult to defend. This led to a great regular season record year in and year out, but that never materialized to a championship, and yet their best player and their style of play was favored by the league. With hand checking being permanently banned in 2005 and the NBA cracking down on physical play, offense was at the top of the priority list for the NBA. This finally brings us to the climax of the NBA, as big men were now in the shadow of their smaller teammates. The year was 2007, and I loved watching the Portland Trail Blazers. LaMarcus Aldridge and Brandon Roy were two incredible talents and I thought would be the duo of the future. The 2007 NBA draft had the Blazers with the first pick, and well, poetically enough, history repeated itself 23 years later.
The Portland Trail Blazers select Greg Oden from Ohio State University.
And just like that, my dream of seeing Kevin Durant with Brandon Roy and LaMarcus Aldridge went down the drain. The Blazers drafted the 7-foot big man, Greg Oden, and we didn't know it then, but that was the last battle between big men that dictated which direction the NBA was heading towards. There were a lot of question marks regarding Kevin Durant, whether he was physical enough to play in the NBA and what position he would ultimately play. Entering the league, Durant was listed at 6'9" or 6'10", but we know now that the man is legit 7 feet tall. And yet, Durant and Oden's game couldn't be any more different. This was Kanye versus 50 Cent, which ironically enough happened in 2007 too. Having contrasting styles go toe-to-toe so we could see which is the better style. It took no longer than 2 years to see which direction the NBA was heading. While Greg Oden sat his rookie year due to injury, Durant averaged 20 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists. In Oden's second year, he put up 9 points and 7 rebounds, while Durant went for 25 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists, and is on his way to becoming one of the most lethal offensive threats we've ever seen. What in 2007 was an absolute toss-up when projecting the two talents, we can see now that Kevin Durant should have been the play, as the NBA put an emphasis on individual skill. We now see all the players practicing their guard skills as the big man fades further and further to the background. The NBA would deal a fatal blow to the big man in 2013. The NBA literally removed the center position from All-Star voting. Centers are now thrown into a pool with small forwards and power forwards, which they call front court players. And since then, we've gone a couple of All-Star games that were absent of a starting center. And I don't think this is an accident. The center position has been grouped with the forwards, which over the last decade has been the most popular positions. As the NBA has transitioned to a more analytical league with teams game planning around their statisticians rather than their players, the NBA has finally been able to eliminate the big man. I don't think that's the end of the story though. While some say Shaq was the last of the Mohicans, I say otherwise. I think the narrative should be the evolution of the big man. The fact that these players have essentially survived their extinction by adapting to the new rules and styles of play and now spreading into the other 4 positions. In true Darwinism fashion, they evolved and are now ready to bring a new age of big men. Even Shaq believes that the Diesel has been reincarnated as a new era of basketball is upon us.
I am playing today. My name is Greek Freak. I play just like Greek Freak. Take it off the glass, high percentage shots. High percentage shots.
As popular as small ball has been, I think that big ball is going to take over.
Hey, yo!
Okay, maybe that's not the right term. I think tall ball would probably be the most simple and appropriate because what I envision is
Hey, yo!
a team where their smallest player is going to be 6'8", who might not even be their point guard. The funny thing is, it's almost happened already.
Oh, you almost had it. You gotta be quicker than that.
Back in 2017, the Philadelphia 76ers had the #1 pick in a very good draft class. As we know now, Markelle Fultz went first to the Sixers, Lonzo Ball second to the Lakers, and Jason Tatum went third to the Celtics. The 76ers were one decision away from having 3 All-Stars that are basically 7 feet. Because they already had Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, who's now listed at 6'11", and Jason Tatum is basically 6'10", meaning they were so close to creating this tall ball lineup where you have talented, versatile big men playing all the positions. Their lineup, had they acquired Tobias Harris, could have been Ben Simmons, JJ Redick, Jason Tatum, Tobias Harris, and Joel Embiid, which I have to say is a big ass lineup, and a lineup that I think would have had success. Starting with the size. This starting five would have JJ Redick as the shortest player at 6'4", but he would be running off screens from 4 guys who are 6'8" and up. Guys would be interchangeable on defense, meaning switching would actually benefit this team. And aside from Redick, Tatum, Harris, and Embiid can all shoot the 3. Now I know that the 2K lineup I just proposed sounds great, but I really think that a team will be able to create something similar sooner rather than later.
You have to put all the different pieces in their proper place.
And as you look throughout the league, you see other guys who are really tall and can play multiple positions. Even as we look at the most recent MVP awards and championships, we see dominant big men taking part of them. At some point, there will be a special from ESPN and the NBA about how the big men are finally back in the league, when in reality, they never left. They simply evolved and spread to all the other positions because the NBA was trying to take the center position away.
And they said the one-on-one post-up is the worst shot in basketball because it's basically one and done, there's no movement.
The same way Jordan ran into a mirror when Kobe came into the league, I think the same will happen with Durant, Giannis, Embiid, and these other tall players. Maybe the reincarnation of the Diesel is what set all of this into
Somebody
motion.
asked me the other day, oh, Shaq couldn't play today. But you're not paying attention. I am playing today. My name is Greek Freak.
Because that's how the NBA works. There's always someone out there working on their game. And maybe, just maybe, we'll get a 7-footer who truly perfects all 5 positions.
I am your father.